Recording in progress.
All right, I would like to call to order the Transportation Advisory Committee meeting for Tuesday, May 21st, 2024. Can I get a call to order, or a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Rendelman.
Present for the next 10 minutes because I got to run up to the elections office as a temporary election worker.
Thank you. Ms. Wadsworth.
Here.
Ms. Hernandez.
Here.
Mr. McEnroth.
Here.
Mr. Simmons.
Present.
Mr. Jessic.
Here.
Mr. Morgan.
Here.
All right, we are going to move on to the approval of the minutes from the April 16th meeting. Are there any changes, additions, subtractions, conversation we need to have there? If not, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And the meeting minutes are approved. Adoption of the agenda. Anybody have any additions or changes to our current agenda? One item we are going to move up is Josh Wheeler. We are going to put into the #1 position for scheduling. So we will do that right after public comment, which we do have, looks like 3 people today. So everybody's going to have 3 minutes. We'll bring you up one at a time to speak. And Vance, can you keep track of the time for me?
Certainly.
That'd be awesome. So our first public comment is going to be Aaron Wolf. You want to speak your name and where you live, and your 3 minutes is yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Wolf. I live in the Elyville neighborhood, just off of Malala on Barclay Hills Drive near a grocery outlet, just up the hill. Let's go ahead.
Yeah. What brings you here today?
Specifically, I have a very long list of Transportation Advisory Committee related things that I've been meaning to bring up ever, but this is my first time actually here, and thanks to prompted by Carla, she's the chair of the Elyville Neighborhood Association. I'm the vice chair, and she encouraged me to come because there was a discussion about a 20-mile-per-hour proposal to allow the city to even make 20-mile-per-hour, streets in certain places. And of course, I have an opinion about that, but I will put it in a bigger context, which is I think about transportation all the time. I'm involved in this because I make a choice consciously to bike a lot more and be out in the neighborhood and also be on foot, and I get the chance to see people and experience all sorts of things. I'll just tell you about my day today. This morning at 7:30, I left with my son Rowan on bike from our house up near a grocery outlet. We have a thing called a Follow Me Tandem where his bike attaches to my bike, but he insisted to bike on his own on the way down the hill. So he's on his 20-inch younger kid's bike, and I have a 1-year-old who now is able to sit in a rack seat. So I was able to go with both of them, which allows me to get to his school, which is Candy Lane on the other side of Gladstone. So it's about 5 miles each way. And our route takes us down Malala, which is the least comfortable bit because that is the narrow bike lane, or he rides on the sidewalk, and I can talk about the details and the issues around that. But then we get into the historic neighborhood where there's some quiet enough streets, and 9th is nice, and there's some pretty steep hills, but we make it, and then we go down Main Street where we really wish there was a sidewalk or something. Like, the issue is that it's right there by cars that go a little bit too fast, and the speed issue, I can just say, I'm very confident about the statistics and the numbers about these things. It's one of those things like a 20 mile per hour is, I'm not too worried that he and some car, he sees the car, the driver can see him, he's okay. It's not cars are dangerous, period. But like, this is a manageable situation. 25, it gets into the zone where it's like, this is uncomfortable, and 25 mile per hour speed limits mean people go faster than that. And there is just this thing of, this is the question I would invite everybody to think about. That is not, unfortunately, the question most people think about with transportation, but can an 8-year-old be biking in this situation? Is there even a route, not on this exact road, but is there a route for an 8-year-old to get around? Can you be a person in the world who is not an adult, who doesn't have a driver's license, and actually travel in the world? That is like the question. If the answer is no, then we're failing. And we can't have a transportation system that says, well, I can imagine some, fancy bike person, in Lycra, the standard middle-aged, confident athlete. Is that the 3 minutes?
It is.
Okay.
Finish your point. You're fine.
My point is, I've done this for a lot of time, that we go in rain or shine, I go all the way, and then I bike back up the hill, and the fact that I have an e-bike makes this more feasible. Oregon City is at the, just okay enough. I can do this. I can actually be with my 8-year-old and out biking, and if it was any worse, I wouldn't be comfortable, and there's a ton of things that it needs to take to get me from being just an outlier to where I can invite friends of his and other people, and the benefits of being able to have a community where we can be out and about is just, I can go on and on. So thank you.
Thank you for your participation, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron.
So I do have Rowan on here as well. Is he wanting to come up as well?
Go ahead.
And you get your very own 3 minutes.
Well, my dad is the one who's been biking for more time, and when I learned to bike, my dad was trying to find places that were really easy to be away from cars, like in a random parking lot near our house. And back then, I was about transitioning from a balance bike to my first pedal bike, and I think I might have to be very, very careful when crossing the street, because I was pretty slow on bikes back then, and my dad was working really hard to keep me safe, and it was pretty hard. And then now I have a bigger bike, gears and stuff, and it's easy to look out for cars, but it's not as easy to block them from going fast. And cars tend to, and there's a problem with speed bumps and stuff like that the city basically does to make people stop complaining about it, and it's cheap. And the more expensive it is, the higher the taxes will be, because there's a range, there's very, very low taxes, but it's a very low maintenance transportation, or very high taxes, and it's really good, like buses, trolleys, and stuff like that, everything. And if we can reduce it to 25-mile difference, an hour difference, then just a 5-mile-an-hour difference would be that.
Could you just tell them a little bit about what your experience is? What do you know, or do you notice or experience because you get to bike?
And when I bike too, it also happens that I go around and cars tend to be really careless. It happens a lot these days. My brakes are not working, speed limit's 25, go more than 25 miles an hour, they hit me. And it almost happened to me once, just today, and it needs to be more child safe. And, you can think, most people like you think, let's see how it would be good for a grown-up. But for an 8-year-old, it tends to go slower and a bit less advanced, because it can be a lot, the grown-up is 10 times as old. And it's much more easy if you can reduce the speed limits. And you just go to as many places as you can, and then you say, there's 25 miles an hour usually in Oregon, and the speed limit for school areas is about 15. So you'll say, we're reducing 25 to 20. Then, so that means you move school areas and areas where for some reason it's lower, and for other reasons even lower down, because if it's easy to bike around, people will more often bike around. And it's basically induced demand, just it's really hard to turn it around. And most of the city says, well, cars are the main are a very big product here in America, and most people have them. Only like less than 10% does not of people in the United States do not have a car. Much, probably like 5% or less. And it happens a lot that people are like, oh, it's too dangerous to bike, so I'll drive. And that makes it so that lots and lots of people drive. And if you can just reduce the amount of roads and stuff like that, you can trade, and you can just make it like a alley or something, and it will cost much less money, even to do all the work of changing it.
Well, thank you very much for coming in today, Rowan. I appreciate that. So I will all take into consideration what you had to say, and we appreciate you coming in.
Up.
Your time is up. Thank you very much.
Well put, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
We also have Carla.
Carla Laws, Oregon City. I'm here. I'm also Elyville Neighborhood Association Chair. I'm here on behalf of the Neighborhood Association. I'm also here as a resident. I'm here for Plenty is 20. The reason I'm here is as a neighborhood ourselves, we're in that transition of obviously being a historic neighborhood in parts, and overall the transition of infill. As a planning commissioner, I'm seeing the changes of what's going on as well, of what's planning on coming through. And by 2028, we may not have a need for a planning commission anymore because the state's going to take over on a lot of decisions. And we're seeing a big impact in infill in the historic districts, especially our historic neighborhoods, whether they're conservation districts or historic homes. What we're seeing is, obviously, the future of what roads are going to look like, narrower roads, one-side parking. Some neighborhoods aren't being impacted yet by that, so they don't see what's going on. A lot of our neighborhood associations are people who don't have kids anymore. A lot of people on there may have grandchildren or are not in touch with what's going on in the neighborhoods. I happen to be one of the few people that has an 8-year-old still. And, going out on the streets, not very easy. You're not going to have her just go out there anymore. My 8-year-old's in the audience here, and just go out there. I mean, I have some people going down 25 on my one-lane street on Roosevelt, and it feels like they're going past 30 miles an hour. So I think definitely depends on where you're at in the city. And obviously that's something to consider. Codfield neighborhood obviously has a lot of newer neighborhoods, wider streets right now, and a lot of their infill right now is on busier streets. But I definitely think neighborhoods like McLaughlin, Kanema already has a lot of 20-mile-an-hour zones that have been very successful from what I've heard from their neighborhood. They just didn't, at this point, know really what's going on, because they're still trying to learn what's kind of going on with this. But my neighborhood definitely has had a lot of infill, and it's really impacting what's going on with transportation. We do have narrower streets. We do have to worry about safety, and we do have busier roads that impact safety for our kids. And I feel like on a lot of our committees right now, families aren't represented. So I do really think it's important to consider that in terms of a decision, and maybe consider certain spots of the city right now to kind of figure out as like a guinea pig to trial and error and see how that works out, especially on narrower streets, and see how, experimental, how that works out. Roosevelt, Logus, all those grid streets and the historic parts are a great place to start. So anyways, I appreciate you listening, and I thank you for what you do and volunteering. Thank you.
Thank you for your time and your input.
Thank you, Carla.
All right, we are on to actually, we moved Josh up, so you have the floor.
Okay. Well, my name is Josh Wheeler. I'm the Assistant City Engineer. I've been with the city for 6+ years now. And I do a lot of different things. But the one thing I've been doing since 2019 is the Pavement Maintenance Utility Fund Plan. So PMUF is what it's commonly called. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So here's a little history. The fee was established back in 2008 by Ordinance 08-1007. We did our first pavement maintenance plan in 2012, where we actually listed out the next 5 years and what roads we would be doing. We then did an update to that plan in 2015 and 2019. And we just completed, actually making some small revisions before we publish it, but the next plan, which will run for calendar years, 2025 through 2029. Some things to note about the fee is that back in 2008, the fee was mostly for single family at the time, and then it added over time. At that time, it was $4.50 a single family unit. Now that fee has increased over time through various resolutions and approvals and things. We are at $15.53 a house here almost 20 years later. So that has significantly increased, but that's because cost of infrastructure has increased and inflation and all those things. And we still, as you'll see later, still cannot keep up with the roads, but we're doing a lot better than we were back then. We also charge all commercial properties, multifamily properties. I have those numbers too if you're curious in a Q&A, but that's where we're at. So what else happened to get here? We, during that 15-year period, have paved 25.7 lane miles of road. We have slurry sealed 2.15 million square yards of slurry. We have spent $27.5 million in PMUF funds from 2008 to 2023. And back in 2011, when we had our first kind of rating of our, what's called our PCI, our Pavement Condition Index, which is an index that ranks from 0 to 100, 0 being gravel, 100 being a perfectly new paved road that's brand new. We were at a 60. We are now at a 76. The software we use and the industry standard that is common says that an average PCI of a city, so we're talking about the average, means you take the 100 roads, the 0 roads, the 50 roads, you average them all together, we're at 76 right now. The software and the standards out there say an 83 is the optimal number to have a system that you can maintain over time without substantial cost, where you have to completely take care of a road that's falling apart, that you can keep up with it through things like slurry seal, crack seal, and basic maintenance a lot better if you're an 83. When you got the lower numbers, it's going to take more effort and more cost. And the revenue we get is somewhere around the $3 million right now. It varies a little bit. But that pays for design, that pays for inspection services, so those are both from engineering consultants. It pays for that crack sealing and slurry sealing. It pays for in-house paving. We spend about $100,000 towards that every year, 1 to 115. We spend about $400,000 on the crack sealing, the slurry sealing, the chip sealing, the microsurfacing. And then we have other things, the miscellaneous that we have to pay for, as well as the PMUF fund does pay for other city positions, parts of their positions, because of finance working with us to implement things and other departments, IT doing things. So there is money that goes out as transfers to assist those departments, since they do help implement the plan. This is a map of conditions on the left and the type of work we've done on the right. So on the left, you're seeing 2024, what does the PCI look like? Green is good, red is bad, yellow is kind of in the middle. Orange is on the worst end, light green is on the upper end. You can see a lot of the outskirts of the city are green, meaning that we've done a lot of that work and it's all taken care of. You can see the McLaughlin neighborhood has a lot of bad roads. A reason that hasn't been focused on in the past is due to the substantial cost. So the software system we use that plans these 5 years of roads, it tries to get the biggest bang for the buck. And so it's better to take a PCI road of 60 and improve it, because that's going to be much cheaper and keep your system up at a higher rate. If you only went after those red roads every year, you would only be able to do a couple roads a year because they're so costly to do. That was the philosophy for the first 15 years, was biggest bang for the buck. That philosophy is changing now and saying, where have we not taken care of things in the city in a way that gets us to that 83 we're looking for, and how do we get there? So we're looking at little cul-de-sac roads that kind of were never touched because they didn't have a lot of traffic on them. We're looking at McLaughlin because of that. The other thing that makes McLaughlin expensive is anytime you resurface a road, ADA guidelines come into place. So the accessibility guidelines, and almost all of our ramps are not up to standards, and we are required by law to update those whenever we touch the pavement beside it. Slurry does not have to do that, but the resurfacing does. So anytime you're doing a mill and resurface, which is taking that first layer off and putting a new layer on, an overlay where you're adding pavement to it, or a reconstruction where you go all the way down to the base and put a brand new base in. Some of these roads are going to be reconstructions, although we'll probably try and do them as a mill and resurface, even though they probably should be a reconstruction. On the right side, you see how much work we've actually done in that 15-year period. You see we have touched a lot of roads. All those gray lines are roads we have touched in the last 15 years. So that does show a really good picture of what we've done. And you can see how the average PCI has went up from 60 up to 76. This is a common chart you'll see at any pavement conference. You'll see at any presentation like this. It just shows the lifespan of pavement. That red line that says 75% of life, that is kind of the curve that if you build it and you ignore it, that's what happens. But that says $2 for PP here, which means pavement preservation. If you keep doing that every so many years, you're going to keep that condition up. And another thing I kind of wrote down in my notes here is, what do some of these things cost? I mentioned all these different methods we use. So crack sealing is currently going at $1.27 a lineal foot. Slurry sealing is going for $2.70 a square yard. The 2-inch mill and inlay, where you take the top layer off and put a new layer on, that's $25 a square yard. If you're got a more local road and you're taking it down to the base, and some of those bases are gravel, some of them are old dirt, but they're stable enough, and so you don't have to do a full 12-inch section. We call that a Recon Light. That's $44 a square yard. But if you've got a road that has that full base, like Central Point, which I did a portion of last year, that way to go all the way down more than 12 inches was $116 a square yard. So that tells you those red roads, those are $100 a square yard. We're probably going to try and find a way to make them 44 or 25 and just do the best we can to get them to a better standard, but not the best standard, just in a way of using the money in the best way possible to stretch the funds. Another way of looking at this chart is that crack sealing and slurry sealing, that should be done somewhere between year 5 and year 15, right in that first curve of PP up there. When you get to year 20, that's what a typical lifespan of these resurfacings are. And that's where you're paying that $25 or $44 a square yard. That's around the 20-year mark. Once you get past that, 30 and 40 years, you're really talking about the $100 a square yard amount. So hopefully that gives you a picture of what things look like there. So why do we do all this? The goals of a pavement maintenance plan. We do this to plan our budgets and plan our projects so that we can coordinate everything around it, whether it be the schools, whether it be the franchise utilities, whether it be other capital projects like sewer and water, whether it be to not build a road that we know is going to get beat up by construction traffic a year from now. We don't always know that, but as much as we know, we put into those plans. And so it helps us project what to do, because a road project now, for example, I'm about to start construction of 2024. It'll start in June. I currently just signed off on what scope we're doing for 2025. So there's a year from planning the roads to actually constructing the roads through design and all the other processes that are required. So you do have to know these things ahead of time, or you'll never be able to get there. There's also other things like, should we do sidewalks? Is a tree going to be impacted? A lot of other things we have to think of in that year time span. But during this 5-year planning process, we document and apply the lessons learned, as it says there. We know how much revenue is coming in based on those amounts I talked about earlier. We got to figure out what kind of treatment we're going to do, and we make our best guess at that during the planning stage, and then we zero in on that during the design phase. And we come up with that list that then is published. Now that list is a guideline. We are trying our best to follow it, but there are many, many factors that make us go off course and come back on from one road deteriorated more quickly to an elected desire to have something done, to a capital project coming in later or earlier than it was anticipated. All those things impact our plan. But this also serves as a communication tool, and we use our website. We did a podcast this past year. We've done things in the newsletter. There's a lot of different ways to try and get the word out, and we still don't have the word out. So we're always looking for new ways to get the word out as well. What goes into the planning process? I hate the way this is set up. We review the past work and go, what went well and what didn't work so well. We do a cost analysis, looking at the best way to use the funds and stretch them. We come up with that list development. We have various workshops. We did do some public noticing with surveys this past time as well, social media post. But there's a whole list of criteria of how we prioritize the roads. Like, why do we decide one road over another? Again, we look at CIP projects. In this next plan that's going to be published, there are massive water main and sewer projects that we're going to come behind and pave the road once they kind of tear it all up. It saves the money on their end because their funds have their own challenges, especially the water fund. It also just keeps it from having that patchwork road, for many, many years. We plan around major development. We did this with Gardner Middle School. A few years ago, you saw most of those roads paved. We've got one more road to pave this coming year in 2025. And we delayed some of those roads. We were going to do them 2 years prior. We delayed them because we knew Gardner Middle School was being redone. We look at that PCI and we compare the PCI versus how much it's going to cost and what's the best bang for the buck there. We look at our TSP. Are there any transportation system plan projects that we can join with? We look at the ADT, the average daily traffic, and say, what's the traffic counts? Are we going to do a 50 count road, or are we going to do a 5,000 count road? Sometimes the answer is yes to both those questions. If the 50 count road hasn't been touched for 50 years, traffic, ADT is not a factor anymore. It's time to do the road. And look at major employers, schools, hospital locations, anything where more traffic is potentially using it and would potentially have any crashes or accidents due to the deterioration of the road. And just look at maintenance needs too. Are we going to redo a road where the water main we know breaks all the time, but we have no funding to replace that water main? Most of the time we're going to delay that, but if we know that road is going to be delayed for 10 years in the water main, we'll probably go ahead and resurface it because we know that we aren't going to be able to get to that water main due to other priorities in the water world. So all those have to come into the discussion when we're making these decisions. So that's how we get there. What does our plan look like? the next 5 years, this is kind of what it looks like. We're going to increase the pavement rehab money each year, which means the engineering will also increase with it. The preventive maintenance, $400,000 a year for that crack sealing, slurry sealing, micro paving, $115,000 a year for in-house paving, which myself and Jason Thornburg, the street supervisor, we partner on. And if I find a small road that I need to resurface, but his guys can do it, it's a lot cheaper for his guys to do it than a contractor that I will hire to do it. And so we look for opportunities like that. His isn't going up just for the fact that it's the right amount right now. In the next 5-year plan, we may need to boost that, but based on the resources he has and the ability to get these programs out and his needs on the preventative maintenance side, we still feel that's the right number for the next 5 years. So you see that it goes up each year, and that's because the revenue also goes with it, and so we try and match that. This is a picture on the left side, any of the colored roads, and I see yellow, purple, or magenta, red, a few other colors in there. Those are the roads we plan to touch with the rehab program, so that mill overlay rehab in the next 5 years. On the right-hand side, you see the preventative maintenance, so the crack sealing, slurry sealing, and micro paving. That's on the right side. You can get a lot more done with that, obviously, because those costs are a lot less. And you'll see a lot of those projects are in those areas that you saw nice and green in that earlier map. Reason for that is they're green for about 5 to 10 years, but without this preventative maintenance, they won't stay green. And so the goal is to come in there in the 5 to 10 year period. So the future PMOF, this whole thing is based on a plan. The PCI could decrease in the next 5 years, even though the funding is going up. And that's because we've hit kind of a plateau. We are not seeing a way to get to 83 or increasing the number, but we do believe the number can stay in that 70 realm. The deferred maintenance, it could increase by 14 million. The current deferred maintenance is around 20 million. We think that could just continue to increase. So it could be in the 30 million range in 5 years. And that's just because there is no additional funds coming in, and we are not able to keep up with inflation. The cost of roads is more than it was 5 years ago, and the amount we bring the PMOF fee up, it doesn't keep up with inflation. But we do understand that, even raising the fee like we do is still a hardship, and so we're thankful for the money we get because, we understand the hardship that it provides to those residents too. But without any PMOF, and let's say we just stop the program, don't do any more resurfacing, no more crack sealing, no more PMOF revenue. In 5 years, we will go from a 76 down to a 68. And I can also tell you that by 2034, we've done the projection, we'll be down to almost 60 again, which is very close to where we started 15 years ago. So that number goes down quicker than it does go up. So while we understand this is a special fee and it's been very productive, and there's lots of other areas of the city that would be helpful to have other fees implemented and let this one go aside for a while, there are consequences to that. So that's the message there. And with that, I'm here for any questions.
Well, I'll have a question, and I know the answer to it is not going to be a one to my satisfaction, but how much attention is being paid to sub-base water saturation? Some of the pavement could last longer if that sub-base is drained, but I know there's been little activity in that area in past projects, and I know there's places in the city where the pavement is deteriorating faster than it would if it was drained.
Yeah, so we do look at that during design. So during the design process, there's a few things we look at. We take borings of every road to see what the actual road section looks like. We talk to our operations department and ask them from a street standpoint, how quickly has that been deteriorating? Has it been normal, quicker, slower? And if quicker, do we know why? Can we figure out why? Water, do we have leaks? That kind of question comes up. Stormwater, have you had any drainage issues? Can we see that ponding is occurring from a surface standpoint? And we also then look at the pavement and we do an analysis, and as I'm sure you know from your past, that you can look at the road and usually tell why it's cracking the way it's cracking. You can usually tell if it's a base failure, a surface crack, or something else. Sometimes it's unclear. Many times you can tell, and so when we find those, we make an anticipation that we're gonna have to do some base repair. Now, what we do to prove that is, like in a mill situation, we mill it off and then we check that milled area, and if there's still pavement left, we look at the cracking and we make the best guess. This happened on Anchor Way a couple years ago. We could have redone that whole road. But there was no, there's no shying away from that, but we didn't have those kind of funds. So we went through, we looked at the cracking of the milled road, and we went for the worst areas that appeared to be base failures, and we did base patches that were 20 by 50 feet, 10 by 60 feet, patches like that. Back in 2019, we did Hazelwood Drive, and that's one of those recon light projects. We actually took off the whole pavement, and when we did that, there was no pavement left. There was only 2 or 3 inches there, and it was on top of dirt. There was no gravel there. And we knew that was gonna happen because we had previously done a sewer project, so we kind of knew that was coming. Well, do we build a whole base? Do we build, 10 to 12 inches of aggregate with 4 inches of asphalt? That didn't seem appropriate for a local road standard, and we didn't have that kind of money. So we brought a dump truck on and did a proof roll, and we looked, where is this road soft? Surprisingly, it was really, really hard, but there were 2 little soft areas. We plugged those soft areas, we re-rolled it, it didn't move anymore, and so then we surfaced it. So that's what we try and do. It's not a perfect fix, but it does try and, I think it's an improvement.
I'm thinking specifically of dealing with groundwater, not leaks out of the system.
Yep.
Because I know where there's several places in the city where we've got springs.
Yep.
Coming up.
We usually find that during the proof rolls.
Yep.
Yep.
And during the winter.
Yep. Yeah, and actually, like I said, I'm planning for 2025 now. I drive the roads in summer 24. I drive the roads in fall. I drive the roads in winter. And sometimes, if I really need to, I drive them one more time in spring to make sure that we caught the things that you don't see during the summer. So I don't drive every road. I drive the roads that are planned. And so that way I can see how is it reacting in these different seasons to try and make an informed decision. Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, so have you guys done any analysis to figure out what would it take, or what would be the cost to bring yourself to 84, like in terms of the fees? Would the fees have to go to $100 per resident, or?
Well, so we haven't looked at it that way. We've looked at what the number is, and I don't have that with me today. It'll be in the report that will be published here in probably 2 or 3 months. It's in the 30 million range. If we were to go out for a bond, let's say, and spend 30 million and then spend that 30 million over the next, I forget if it's 5 or 10 years, and just take care of the system and put it into 83 position, 83 condition, that is what we've seen so far, is that you throw 30, 35 million at it with a bond and you get it to where you're going and then start fresh again. That's how you would get it to 83. Without a big, push at something, the way we're doing it now, we will never make it to 83. Could you increase the fee, to something, much more substantial than it is today? Yes, but you're still chasing the problem because you're always chasing the condition. Whereas if you do a bond, like some cities have done, and get you into where we need to be and then maintain from there, that's what's going to keep your system in the 80s. Right now, we're going to tread water somewhat. Yeah.
And so in another way of looking at your percentages, the new development is bringing in big numbers. But that's also adding to your total lane miles that you need to take care of, which in the long run is going to decrease your percentages.
A guy that was thinking just like me a year ago when we started the 5-year project, there were two questions I had at that time was, we're adding more into our system, how are we going to maintain it? But my second one was, is the PCI actually somewhat inflated, that our actual PCI, if you look at just our roads without all these new ones, are we actually not as good as we think we are, in the 70s? That statistic surprised me because I forget what the number is now, 74 or whatever it is. It's only inflated by about one PCI thing, that those new roads are only adding a very small percentage of improvement to our PCI. If we didn't look at the new roads over the last 15 years, we'd be at like a 73, and we're at a 74 instead. So it's interesting that it hasn't impacted our PCI. Will it impact our overall cost? I kind of think it's going to be about the same, because if our PCI is not being inflated too much, I don't think that extra maintenance is actually going to be a major hurdle. Yeah.
When you're at the top of that curve, but once you get 5-10 years down the road, then that curve steepens.
It's all about the preventative maintenance program. Like, there are some cities in this metro area that don't use preventative maintenance, and where I came from in Illinois, there's some of those that don't. As an engineer, that is the worst thing you can do, is not spend money on preventative maintenance. A lot of people think it's easy to cut, crack sealing, easy to cut, slurry sealing, easy to cut. That is the worst thing you should ever cut in a pavement program, because it keeps those roads together. It keeps those roads together. And that's why we are where we are. And I think continuing those programs is how we will stay where we are, for sure.
I've seen some studies where the slurry seal done in about 5 years adds considerable to your life.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and we've seen those same studies, and we've done some kind of just looking at it ourselves and experience what we're seeing in the city. And we're always looking at new technologies. There's a big question out there about fibers. Should you put these fiberglass fibers into the pavement? Does it make any difference? Is the cost worth it? The jury's still out on that one. I have my personal opinion. I like them in the right area. Some areas, they're not going to make a difference based on the slope, based on the shade, based on if it's full sun. Those all make a difference. And we have put fibers in some of our roads, and we've been able to compare. On one of the roads, actually, we put fibers on one lane and none on the others, so we could watch it over time. Very interesting, because it was the right road for fibers, and the area without did not, it's deteriorating more quickly. On another road, we did the same thing, where we expected to not see a difference. Again, that road didn't need fibers in that case, because you'll find that both sides look exactly the same, and you'd never know that one side is fibers and one side is not. So, we're trying to stay up with the trends and the innovations that are out there, and even changing our asphalt mixes over time. Making them tighter, making them stronger, without upping the cost.
You looked at changing the budget, so it looks like on your budget, it looked like it was flat year over year on the PM side.
Yep.
And then it's been my experience where if we increase the preventative maintenance, you have less corrective maintenance because you're extending the life of the asset or, what you're doing, so.
If we did something like a bond and got us to, the realm of 80, we would be focusing a lot more of our money on preventative maintenance, and we would actually increase it over time. Where we are right now is that the amount of roads that are viable for preventative maintenance, because certain roads, there's far enough gone that cracks and slurries won't do anything, except waste money, in my opinion. That's kind of our situation right now, that the amount of roads we have, 515 keeps up with it. But if we get to a higher standard and have to take care of it, at a bigger rate, then yes, increasing that is going to be a necessity, which means the things like the mill and resurfaces will go down.
So if we do a bond measure would have to go, in Oregon City has to go to the people.
Right. So that would be the challenge with that, yeah.
What's the mechanism on adjusting the PMIF by itself? Is that a city commission or? City
commission, yeah. So, just to go back to the funding, that started at, $4 and is now up at 15. It needed to be 11 when it started. That was too much to start out with one big swath. And so they implemented it over a 4-year period. And you can read all about this on the website if you're interested. They did that to kind of, not hurt everyone quickly in their pocketbooks. And then the city commission adopted an interest rate that increases it, by, I don't know the rate. I'm going to guess it's 3%, or it's the CPI, whatever the CPI is for that year. That's going to be my guess, because that's how most of our fees are increased. I just don't recall how this one's done. That's how it is. So we would have to go to the commission and say, instead of following the CPI or the construction index, whichever one we follow, we want to do a 3% this year, or 4% next, 5% the following. We'd have to do a rate study that would say how you should do it to get where you want. With respect to Cheddarmare's comment, that would tell us, okay, do we need to be at 20? Do we need to be at 15? Or we're at 15. Do we need to be at 20? Do we need to be at 30? We don't know that number, and a rate study would be the way to get there.
And statistically, if we got the score to an 83, that would be the best use of resources fund-wise.
The industry standard says that it's okay to have roads that are not perfect.
Right.
And to average them all out would be an 83.
Okay.
I do want to make one separate comment, because in all the world that I deal with at work here, I deal with the development, I deal with the capital, I kind of deal with both sides. And the public comment we get the most often about roads, especially on the socials, which you cannot always take everything fully there, but I still take it as it's an opinion. So the opinion, has validity. Some people continue to say our roads are bad. Now, a 76 is a good number, in my opinion. It could be better. We hope it gets better. But I think a big reason for a lot of those type of comments, and we hear, and we heard through the 5-year plan study, the comments we got, it's Beaver Creek Road, 213, Redland Road, 99E. Roads we have no ability to do anything to.
Not yours.
Right. That's a very hard message to get out, that those are not our roads when they're in our city. Unless you work in government or are on a committee like yours, you don't know that. Do we have other roads that are in really bad condition? Oh, I could sit here and name many of them. There are reasons they're not being done, and if you want to come to me separately and wonder why Amanda Court's not being done, I can tell you all the reasons why it's not being done right now. They're very good reasons.
And a lot of it, Dave, is that $600 a square yard you mentioned?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I think it's all about messaging. So I know that people have, when they look something, oh, you're gonna raise a fee from like 15 to 25, that's a big increase. Mm-hmm. But being able to show off and say, okay, this is what we have done, this is what we're doing, and putting signs and getting it out there so people can relate that $5 to what they're getting. I mean, I sit on Clackamas County Community Road Fund Committee, and that seems very successful. There's a lot of people that come and we also look, from the equity standpoint, make sure that dollars are being spent across the county. And so even though maybe there's one part of the county needs more money, but there was a conscious effort made to be able to spend some dollars, and then there'll be more support for that fund down the road. So I think I know where you guys are coming from, but sometimes you also have to look at, like, we do need to make some investments if we want a fee to go up, or we want a bond passed to make, significant improvements in the infrastructure.
I think the one, message to leave you with is, on June 11th, a similar presentation, I think we're just going to make a couple tweaks, but is going to be made to the city commission in a work session. It's going to be made by our consultant consor, Gabriel Kropp. I'll be there with him to answer any questions and to assist with anything. But one reason we're doing this presentation, it hasn't been done for quite a while, I think about 10 years. We're giving the commission an update on, this is a good program. We went from 60 to 76. That should be applauded. Like, that was a good investment. Was it enough? Depends on your opinion. Maybe 76 is a good number. Just because the industry says 83 is the right number, that's for someone else to decide. But at the end of the day, should we reduce the fee? Should we flatline the fee? Should we eliminate the fee? My messaging is, if you do that, you're going to go back to where you came from, and that doesn't seem like a good idea either. But we're just there to provide information. It's a good program. There is deferred maintenance, but we can keep going forward. And if we keep not catching up, there are other options out there.
I think, especially when you go into a city commission, I think coming there and having some of those figures, what does it take to get us to that level? I think if I was sitting on commission, I would be asking that question. And, for people to understand, like, this is how much money we have to spend, and we'll never get there. And I think people can think common sense.
The percentage of the roads that were in the red, that were those severely in need of repair, what percentage of the city streets are in that red, and what was that number, say, 5 years ago? So are we spending that $2 amount on all of our new roads and we're keeping them well maintained? And that group of red, although we're not getting to them in a timely fashion, is that growing? Is that red number getting significantly bigger to where we're pushing things off into the $60 category?
From 2008 to 2024, this is conjecture. I don't have stats on this. But from what I can tell, yes, the red was growing over that time because we were getting the best bang for our buck to stabilize the system and improve the system. But as I said earlier, now we're shifting our priorities to, okay, we've been able to get to maintaining the system now. Now let's go after the big fish, as well as the old parts that really never got touched because of their lack of ADT. That's where we're really heading now. That's going to cause some investment, and really over the next 5 years, our hands are tied a little bit because we're going to be coming behind capital projects for 4 of those 5 years. So Malala, Holmes, Beaver Creek, not Beaver Creek, Holmes, Malala are 2 roads that we're going to be right behind. And then we're going to be working in the upper McLaughlin area, in kind of the area that Carla was talking about, Willamette, Logos, Roosevelt, and then over on the other side, in the 1st to 5th area, south of 5th, that area, because those are going to have inflow and infiltration projects going on, and we're going to work with each other to make all that happen. So we're going to have more flexibility in where we can spend the funds starting again in the next 5-year plan in 2030.
In your projections for this 5-year plan, do you show the number of miles decreasing, for what you can actually accomplish with that budget, just due to inflation? I mean, it feels like the inflation is outpacing what you're going to be able to accomplish with that budget. So
yeah, we haven't projected that, so I don't know that answer. Are we doing fewer miles a year as we get, longer in the program? I don't know that answer. But I wouldn't be surprised if we are based on, I mean, like 1 year, all I'm going to be on is Malala. I will have no money to be on other projects. But Malala's needed today. But we're waiting for those 2 sewer and water projects to get done before we get in there.
Thank you very much. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Josh.
All right, we are on to new business.
Well done.
And the neighborhood associations.
Yeah, I added that for our annual report. I was updating, like how many, like we had a goal of attending these meetings, or you all had a goal. And, so I wanted to confirm what was actually attended so that we record it correctly and know where we're at and headed towards. That's why I added it.
Okay. So I can confirm that Raymond and myself were at McLaughlin on September 7th, so I can confirm that.
Thank you.
Tim, you were at Park Place.
Yeah, I did Park Place. That was,
And I was, excuse me, at Kenema and Elyville. I can go back through my calendar at home if you would like the specific dates.
I don't think I need the dates.
Okay.
I think I originally was putting in the dates because it was helpful when we had discussions, but
So the inactive ones, that's
Thank
kind of
you.
hard to attend.
yeah, not.
So looks like Bruce, is he going to Gaffney coming up? Is that what's
He
TBD?
was scheduled to attend back when we had the first conversation, so it's
Okay.
more, I can follow up with an email with him.
Okay. So it doesn't look like anybody was neglected other than Two Rivers?
I had a conversation with someone last week who is a part of the Gaffney Lane, and they said that it was inactive.
It was inactive actually up until today. Today is the first meeting, because I live in that area and I was gonna help set it up, but then I was like, I have too much stuff going on, I can't.
Actually, Josh, who just presented, is headed to that meeting right now.
Oh, is he?
yeah.
Okay,
Oh.
so yeah. so
Where, do
that
they
was
still
supposed to
meet at that retirement?
be- It just started today.
Not sure.
So
But I mean, is that where they're meeting?
Oh, I can't recall where it was gonna be scheduled.
I can find out for you.
So I'll kind of piggyback a little bit because we're going to get into goals here in a minute. I think I'd like to ask everybody to do this again, but maybe this go around, we call it a cross-pollination, so if not in your own neighborhood this time. So let's get outside our box just a little bit and go see one of the neighborhoods.
Mine's inactive.
Okay. So if you did do one, do a different one. So we can maybe collectively get together and decide where that's going to be, but broaden our spectrum just a little bit on that. With that being said, we can probably just jump right into goals 2024, 2025. There's a lot of red on here, but we didn't change a whole lot.
We didn't. The first one is the same. I just reworded it. And it's also a good reminder that in January, we're to look over the neighborhood traffic fact sheet, make sure it's current and up to date. And according to the goals, it would also be to engage with the public, which I don't know if we've done in the past, since I've been here for the past 2 years. It was more that we just updated it.
And I think, so when I was at the neighborhood association, I did take the fact sheets with
did?
us.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So
I think that would be one of those things, I think I put one on every chair whether they wanted it or not, so, that we can bring with us as a tool. I brought that, and I brought the information on the speed humps. There was a third one that's on our website, I'm trying to remember, but there was a handful of things that I brought with, just so they had some material to take home, and if they forgot who was there presenting, so.
Keep it then.
Yep. Engagement with the community and education was our next one. Again, we just talked about the neighborhood associations. 20 is plenty. I think that's one we're gonna be engaging in those meetings to get kind of a feel from the individual neighborhood associations, what their position is. For, against, they don't care. Try to get a little bit of information out of those particular neighborhood associations. Participation in National Night Out, something we've done in the past, something we'll continue to do in the future. Present to the OC Youth Committee, Vance and I did that. And I think we added, maybe it's down the road just a little ways, the distracted driving and drunk driving awareness campaigns, they were voicing their desire to maybe participate or spearhead those. So, right there at the bottom. So we were talking about maybe handing that off to the Youth Advisory Council. The mayor was looking for some projects for them to do. And we
That's
thought
nice.
that might be one that we can relay to them and help them with. And then we,
Maybe they could help at National Night Out too.
I believe we brought that,
Yeah,
we did bring that up,
we
I
talked
think.
about that in June.
Yeah.
I'll be volunteering Chris Wadsworth to help me at National Night Out.
And we'll just pre-volunteer the entire Youth Advisory Council.
Oh, yeah, that's
So
a
I'm
great
sure they would
idea.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Do we still have those garbage can signs?
We have lots of them.
Yep. Are we able to go one page up,
Yes.
please? Thank you. We did discuss, before we had police ride-alongs, we were trying to get a perspective of all the decisions that we make and how that affects our police department, whether they have the ability to implement all these speed zone changes, or when we're complaining about a neighborhood and wanting them to go do an extra patrol. Before COVID, we were talking about a ride-along program, and I think that's been suspended with COVID. So we did come up with a couple of additional ideas that maybe supplements that. There is a group, there's a Citizens Academy for OCPD that maybe one or two of the members could participate in. I'd be happy to volunteer. I think Bruce had mentioned at one point he might want to volunteer. And the chief.
Bruce had attended Citizen
Oh, you
Academy.
did?
Yeah,
Oh, perfect.
when I was still working.
Oh, perfect. And then the other thing was the Chief Advisory Council group. I just think having some sort of liaison between the police department and what we're doing, that we have a good understanding of, I know what we want to do and what we'd love to do, but is it realistic in the eyes of the police department? Can they enforce it? Can they do the extra patrols? Are they in favor of the 20 is plenty? Getting the, the people who are doing their daily work to actually put some input into what our decisions are. Next one was member participation is needed on the community advisory committees. Emphasis on safe routes to school and the National Bike Walk School event. So, not 100% familiar on that one, other than the fact that that was on there previously. Remain involved in the larger development projects relating to transportation by tracking projects and providing comments. I think that's a pretty basic purview of what we're doing. We already mentioned the transportation campaign, heading that over to the Youth Advisory Council. We can skip to the next page. Advise on and provide support of transportation grant opportunities. I had told Dana Webb, one of my notes was grants, grants, and more grants. And she is actively participating, I think, in every possible scenario that we can get additional funds out there. So she's going to continue to do that. Participating in the county transportation system plan. It sounds like the county is going to be putting together a council, and I believe Dana was going to ask the county for a slot on that council for one of our members, so that we could be coordinating with the county. Establish a recommendation for standard capacity and opening listening to citizen requests like we did today with probably our youngest participant to date. And at this point, I'll leave it up to you guys to let me know if you want to make any changes, add something, delete something, or let me know your thoughts.
I put it in your packet just in case you're hands-on. Like,
see,
you
I
want to
could've
write
been looking at that the
notes or
whole
look
time.
at it later. You could always email.
yeah, if you need time to look it over again, digest it, that's fine. And you can either email Audrey or I.
Is the police department doing the ride-alongs again?
I don't think so. I need to check on that. I know that there was a COVID thing.
Yeah.
I've heard, again, this is not, I can't confirm necessarily, but through the grapevine, there's a lot of new officers
Yes.
at OCPD, and every new officer takes an experienced officer to be their field training officer. So, I'm happy to check and report back out to the group if ride-alongs are still a thing. I think right now they're not.
You might have to sit back in a cage or with the dog.
That's right.
What about the prioritization, I guess, of goals? So like, as I look at this one about promoting tourism infrastructure that doesn't negatively impact neighborhoods, when I saw all the red that Josh just displayed, it was like in the McLaughlin area, which is like the heart of where, people are going to be traveling, once the tribes finish their project at some point, and, whatever happens along the waterfront area. I know West Lynn is working on stuff, and so I'm just thinking, like, in order to boost tourism here, we have to have good roads there, and or they're gonna get, further, in worse shape than they are if we don't address the problem, ahead of time. So can we prioritize, I guess, some of our goals or pavement plans or, plans based on those kinds of things?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know if I have an answer for you, but I think it's a really, really good notion to talk about.
Yeah, and I think that would maybe go under 1, 2, 3, 4, the remaining involved in the larger developments related to transportation by tracking projects, providing comments. So I think you could almost argue this is an existing project and plan. But I would say that we should, revisit it and not let it get 2 years down the road before we look at that chart again and see that 3/4 of the city is now red.
Now, keep in mind, I've looked at the PCI chart many, many times myself. And yep, you look at the Portal McLaughlin neighborhood and there's a lot of red there. The PCIs are very low in that area. Those, if you did the same exact color-coded chart in, I think Josh said 2011 when it started, they'd all be red then, for the most part. So those poor roads just have not had a lot of attention for decades. And as Josh put it so well, we're truly just trying to spend our money where it makes sense, and where current guidelines from other municipalities and DOTs are recommending, and we do a lot of looking at what other municipalities are doing and their PCIs, and it's not uncommon to have your old part of town, quote unquote, be in not great shape PCI wise.
People living in those neighborhoods don't feel probably that.
Oh, I'm sure you're right, Jed. We're not making light of it at all.
Yeah.
I'd love to see those streets be improved, as would Josh, as would Jason Thornburg, as would John Lewis, the mayor, the commission. So, but they'll get there at some point.
Okay. Any other changes, comments, or are we feeling that we would be okay moving forward with this as our goals for the next year?
One question, what's the X's represent in those grids?
So if you look on the back, those are the city commission's, their goals. And these X's tell us how they relate to the city commission's overall goals. So how ours intertwine with their goals.
Okay.
Yep.
Good to see that.
All right.
Do we need a motion?
I was just going to ask, do we need a motion on this?
I think it would be appropriate.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Yes.
Motion to approve?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right. Motion carries. On to our next one, annual report.
Yeah, so I've gone through all of the minutes from 2023, and I've listed out all the memberships of when Ben and Henry were elected. We have our 3 new members, and then these are your, like, when you started in current membership terms, and then the presentations that you received, updates that were just given throughout the meeting, and then action, things that you participated in conversations and helped solve.
And this is what I'm going to be taking to the commission next month?
Exact, June 5th.
Okay.
And I think Audrey might have mentioned it, this format that you're seeing it in is a very similar format to what the planning commission does. So good on Audrey for catching that and trying to have some consistency on how different boards present their reports and achievements. So thank you for that. Very good.
All right. I feel comfortable presenting that.
To you. Okay, and if you find something you're like, we gotta change that, send an email.
Okay.
But it does need to be before, or by noon on Friday. This coming
This
Friday.
week? Okay. All right. We need approval, so is there a motion to approve the annual report, which I will be presenting to the city commission?
I will make such a motion.
Is there a second?
Yes, I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries as well. And on to discuss John Lewis's not retirement.
Yes, that's true.
So I think everybody knows that Mr. Lewis is going to, and he's been very adamant about this, not necessarily retire, but he is going to end his employment here with the City of Oregon City in late August, and yet to be determined what other great things he's going to go on to do after he's done working here. There's lots of theories floating around, but I'll let him explain that in June. There was a card floating around. I think everybody got to sign it. I appreciate that. I know he'll appreciate it. He is currently somewhere in the Caribbean right now. So,
And here I thought he was out sick today, so.
yeah.
Pre-celebration.
That's right. So yeah, I don't know what else to really add, other than, I might say a few things at the next TAC meeting that he's at, and if any of you are so inclined, I think he'd really appreciate that.
How many years has he been with the city?
20 plus, yeah,
Couple years.
yeah. 20 plus, it's gonna be very, very difficult to replace him,
Well, if he's watching the video, we won't dwell on this too much then.
yeah. I'll have Steve cut out the mushy stuff, like I said.
All right, on to the Public Works report.
Okay, there's not a huge amount to talk about. The CityROVER, I think you've all have heard about the CityROVER. It's our artificial intelligence device that we typically have mounted in the sweeper. What you see in front of you is an example of one of the readouts that Jason Thornburg, our transportation manager, views on a weekly basis, sometimes a couple times a week. So the sweeper travels the city. The CityROVER device picks up potholes, and we tried it out as a beta version for approximately a year. We were pretty impressed. It's helped our operations out in regards to identifying the potholes and keeping track of them. And it is somewhat labor intensive for Jason. He has to go through and manually, click those and say they're complete on the CityROVER system, but he's got it down pretty good. It doesn't take him a huge amount of time. So specifically, the reason I'm bringing this up, I think in the last meeting or two, I mentioned that I'm taking this data that Jason generated for me and a report, and I've done this once before, last year. I sent a report to my contact at ODOT, and I sent a report to my contact at Clackamas County. The ODOT report has, obviously, ODOT roads, because the sweeper does travel on ODOT roads, getting from point A to point B or going to the dump site. We don't sweep ODOT roads, but we still do collect some data. Same with county roads. That's even more evident on county roads because we have those smattered through town. So we, frankly, are doing ODOT and Clackamas County a courtesy, I think, by going, hey, folks, instead of going, hey, you got potholes, go fix them, we can go, hey, you've got some potholes, and here is exactly where they are. Last year, when I sent the information to ODOT and Clackamas County responded right away and fixed several. I don't know if they fixed them all, but they did respond right away. ODOT did respond not with quite as big an effort, but I appreciated that I did get some movement out of them. So I haven't sent these reports yet. That's one of my to-dos later this week or early next week. And I'll keep you apprised, maybe at the June meeting, if you're curious, if they have reached out to me or not, and if we see that they're actually addressing these.
So curious, I mean, this rover is running daily and collecting the data. You're sending to ODOT and Clackamas DTD report once a year?
Well, keep in mind, last year when I sent it, I don't know that we'd actually purchased the program yet. It was still a beta version. Then we got into fall, winter, and now I don't know how many times, Jettimer, I'll send it, but more than once a year. You know, we're just now getting into the dry season. I would think that, you know, August, early September might be another good time for us to run a similar report. And Jason knocked these reports out, and, you know, it doesn't take him very long. So, and there's no limit on how many times I can send.
I feel like
I just don't want to wear out my welcome with my ODOT and county contact.
I think I should be a monthly or quarterly.
If quarterly is a recommendation of the TAC board, I'll be more than happy to do that, seriously.
I think it would make sense. I mean, I think they want to know too.
Though, maybe it's part of their scorecard or like a metric that they have to respond to so many. So if they know about them.
Yeah, I don't know that answer, if they have a metric like that, or
It's a
goals
squeaky
like
wheel thing, just send it to ODOT
Yeah.
daily.
Like I say, I don't want to mess up my contact with ODOT. But no, I think quarterly is.
I think quarterly would make sense.
I do too.
I agree.
Yeah.
Has this been correlated with the PCI information to see if any of these are in the bad, the good?
Nope, because they're not city streets.
I was just curious because it'd be nice to know that the potholes were in the bad area.
They are. Do we have potholes on city streets? Absolutely. But as Josh alluded to, the majority of our pothole calls, and I can confirm this, are from roads and highways that are not the cities.
But it would be interesting, I think, to just compare to see if any of these are in the improved areas.
So look how many pothole on 213 down.
I guess that has to do with all the landfill.
Yeah.
Yeah, landfill and at the bridge, the asphalt at the bridge.
Oh, that's horrible down there.
Yeah, it's really bad.
So last month, I went to the ODOT, and I reported and made two filings. One was the 213 from Redlands Road to the on-ramp, and the worst section is from the gas station back to Redlands Road. And then I did an additional one. There was two more big ones happening right past the Abernathy Bridge, turning into another trench there where they were killing cars with, and they did respond in about a little over a week. They did finally fill it up, but they never responded to me about the slew of them. I said, just get out and walk it. I said, all three lanes are horrible. The center and the right lane are the worst.
Right.
And that was right after the ice storm, or not the ice, but I guess it was, we had ice, whatever we had that winter event.
Can you do a quarterly report too?
Yeah, and so even as a citizen, I reported it, they didn't respond, other than we received your email.
But then you ultimately did see some action out there.
Only on 205.
Gotcha.
And they were getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And it's the same area where they had about 20 cars one night that were all wiped out. They broke their rims and everything.
Right.
I had contacted them before that on the Ask ODOT and said, you guys got a lake appearing, near the Jersey barrier.
Right.
And then the next night on the news, there's 20 cars
Yeah.
with busted rims and tires and flats and everything, because the thing was getting deeper and deeper and deeper. Yeah.
Good.
But what amazes me is these people drive around all day long. They're in company vehicles, and nobody knows the hazards on the road.
I think
There's got to be a better way of reporting it.
Yeah.
Are
you talking citizens or ODOT staff?
I'm talking about ODOT staff that are driving around in the truck, the guy with the flasher car, the Comet vehicle, like that. I have on my drive cam, I have I-5 where I had to dodge 2 trash cans on the freeway. One of them hit me, and the other one I was able to get around in heavy traffic. This morning, there was a pond, you know, like a sinking pond, and a trash can on the 205 around the river there, just past Abernathy Bridge. That was this morning. Another morning, there was a chainsaw and a leaf blower that was on 205 in the same section.
You're a magnet.
I could, if I wasn't so hurried to get to work,
You could have a new chainsaw.
I could have new chainsaws and everything in there. I mean, there was a bumper a couple days ago, you know, on this stuff. And it sits there for weeks. There's 2 tires that have been sitting on the flybridge of the 217 for 3 weeks. Now, you can't tell me with all that construction going on 217, they have no idea that there's 2 tires.
You are correct. I cannot tell you that they don't have any idea about that.
So we need to know what's a better way of communicating with them, because the only way they respond is if I call Don Hamilton.
Oh, yeah, he's a PIO.
Yeah.
For them, yeah.
All right, we are
It sounds like you have as good a response as I do, Tim.
Okay, so that just makes you feel better.
Thank you.
We are on to the communications, and I think, Henry, this came from you. I don't know if you wanted to take it, but there was a communication on the Clackamas River Bridge.
Considering that I'm probably the only one that's read this.
I looked at it.
Oh, okay. But this is basically FYI, that is to say, the state is getting ready to start a project to repaint the McLaughlin Bridge over the Clackamas River. And they do have a contact on this for more information, but the big takeaway for us is probably the timing of the event, which is scheduled for 2026, and thinking about what detours may be installed, because they do hint and state that this bridge will be shut down a time or two to facilitate work over the roadway. So the question is, how is it going to affect us? And is there anything we actually need to consider in that regard? But that's the main reason for bringing this up.
And it's nighttime closure. Nighttime closure.
Yeah. But they do say full lane closure in it.
We'll just have to use their GPS.
I would say, Henry, thanks for bringing this up. It's something for us to have on our radar moving forward. And I'd like to think that when ODOT gets closer to pulling the trigger on this project, and as you alluded to before the meeting, you know, it's ODOT, it's a big project. It could, the time may vary, right? But once they get closer, you know, we should have access to their detour routes and what they're planning in that regard. And once staff gets that information, we absolutely will share it with TAC and have a discussion.
And because it's a maintenance project, because it's 2 years out, this is the start of the thing, it could be delayed another year, depending on how funds at the state level are dealt out. So
Right.
It's very preliminary.
Well, like I said, we'll keep it on the radar.
All right.
Thank you.
Next item I've got says adjournments. So unless one of you wants to stop me, this meeting is adjourned.
All right. Thank